Hello, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Hope everyone's off to a great week. As you can see, if you are watching this on YouTube, I am not in front of my usual Boston Balling background. I am actually traveling right now, so I am currently in North Carolina, which is a lot of fun, by the way. If you have never been, I definitely recommend checking out this state. Although it's super hot at this time of year, it is a fun place. So definitely, if you have the chance to make it down here at any point, if you are from the Northeast like me, definitely come down, check it out. It's a great time. But obviously, some big news in Celtics land right now. So I am here to discuss it all with you. I have a great guest with me who is very knowledgeable about the Celtics and the NBA. He has a Celtics podcast and also is a writer for Celtics Wire. Cameron Tabatabaie, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Actually, I'm wearing a Red Sox shirt, and I'm mourning the loss of Kike Hernandez. That I think that weighs more emotionally on my mind than any of the Celtics stuff.
It's always tough when players that make an impact on the team, leave or get moved. It's just at the end of the day, you remember it's a business, but it's also a tough pill to swallow sometimes too.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But yeah, no, I appreciate you hopping on here. I definitely want to get into all of it with you. But first, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and the Celtics work that you do?
Sure, great. So like you said, I write for Celtics Wire. It's one of a bunch of actually, I technically just cover the NBA, but I end up writing mostly about the Celtics for USA Today, SMG. So we have a lot of good coverage. We also do a lot of aggregating, much to the chagrin of the big suits. And then I also host the Celtics Lab podcast with Dr. Justin Quinn and Alex Goldberg, which we've been doing for a while. So yeah, I covered the Celtics for a good bit with Celtics Hub, which I don't know if is sunset or on pause. I don't really know what's going on with the Celtics Hub. But I covered the game for a while. I moved to Australia for a little bit. I have since become a full-time teacher, and I get to do this as a bonus gig, which is really tremendous. So I am at all. I am, invested, but I also am in the classroom. I'm Mr. T by day and Cameron Tabatabaie by night, I guess.
That's super cool. The two identities of Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, teaching's probably fun too. It's probably a really rewarding thing getting to be around the kids all the time.
It's the same job. I'm educating people about world history, and then later I educate them about Jaylen Brown extensions, I suppose.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. Good for you. Yeah, I'm definitely excited to, hear your insight because obviously it's been a little bit of a roller coaster of an off season for the Celtics from a fan perspective. Just a lot of emotions that we've had to go through this off season. Obviously, the biggest news that I want to talk about first is what happened yesterday with the Celtics finally getting an extension done with Jaylen Brown, giving him like the richest contract in NBA history for 5 years, $304 million, which is awesome. I looked at the situation and I was a little bit unsure whether they were going to extend him or not. I think, with the organization, they weren't really giving a lot of indication as to what they were going to do. He's still in his prime. So I think, for the Celtics and what they're trying to do, this makes sense. But what was your initial reaction when the news broke that they got this deal done?
My initial reaction was I was in the car and I was frustrated because I wasn't going to be able to write about it for another hour. So my initial reaction was selfish. I think that I never worried that the deal wasn't going to get done. We can get into it, but that's just the nature of the NBA business is when you have really good players, you supermax them. And sometimes they are below market value. LeBron provides more value to his team than the money on his contract. There's no price you can put on Nikola Jokic or Tatum, right? Other max contracts or supermax contracts aren't worth 35% of the cap, or a player isn't providing 35% of production, but you have to do it. So I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring out whether or not I love it for the Celtics. I suspect I do. I also think that it was always going to get done. Like Zach LaVine is on a max contract. Karl Anthony Towns is on a max contract. There's a lot of players that I would not pick ahead of Jaylen Brown that are making max or near max money. And that's just the nature of the beast. You drafted a guy number 3 in 2016. He's played for 2 All-Star games and he made All-NBA. You pay him. And for Jaylen, he wasn't going to turn. I mean, he's he does things a little differently, but he wasn't going to turn down millions and millions and millions of dollars to go sign with the Spurs or something. I mean, unfortunately, the way it works is free agency comes down to who has cap space. So maybe Jaylen, in his bones, didn't want to hitch his wagon to Boston for 5 more years, but there weren't necessarily teams that had the cap space. So I think both sides would be foolish to blink. And now it comes down to what happens next.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, he enjoys playing in Boston too. And he's gained a lot of comfortability being in Boston. So it would have been tough for him, to go elsewhere, knowing that there's a lot of potential with the Celtics team also. And so for him, he's just sitting pretty right now. He just got paid. And I guess, my next question would be, do you think that he's worth the money that he just got? Because I have seen a lot of people on Twitter saying like, well, we all saw him, in the playoffs with all the turnovers and not being able to control the basketball. Like, I don't think they should have given him this much money, but it's the type of situation where you really see Tatum and Brown as those 1 and 2 guys on this team. And if the Celtics didn't pay him, somebody else was going to, was the reality of the situation. So do you think he's worth what they gave him, or do you think that he really still has to prove that he's worth that money?
I don't think he has to prove it, but again, that just comes down to like the nature of how contracts work in the NBA. So like I said, there are some players that outperform 35% of the cap, that they are providing production and off the court value that you really couldn't put a price on it. I think the estimate was Victor Wembanyama joining the Spurs. The Spurs became their valuation came in $500 million higher that day. So you can't pay Victor Wembanyama too much money, right? Like I said, other all-star players are overpaid. They are the second star or the 1B or whatever you want to call it, and they are paid probably more than on any given night they ought to be. But I have 2 things. First of all, I don't know if that's true about Jaylen. At times, I think he was better than Jason during the regular season. And he's been to 5 Eastern Conference Finals. That's not nothing. That's more than Damian Lillard. And look at how much everyone wants Damian Lillard on their team. So Jaylen's a really good player. If the whole Celtics team choked in the finals, Jaylen just did it in a more visible way. But second, then the thought experiment of, okay, so you're going to replace – how are you going to replace what Jaylen Brown offers? There isn't a lateral trade that you're going to do, and then you have to worry about paying this person and making sure they're happy here. And the value of you drafted him should mean something. I mean, I don't know. We don't have to get like too emotional about player movement or whatnot, but what do you want? Like the conversation around trading Jaylen for the number 3 pick was extraordinary to me, because it was like, okay, this dude is 26 and he's still probably a little too young to get it done in the finals. So you're going to draft a 19-year-old and that's going to solve the problem? No, it's ridiculous. Boston now has 2 All-NBA forwards in their prime. Jaylen's going to be 31 when this contract ends. It's not, Lillard's contract or one of these things that takes you into the deep 30s. He's going to be as good and as sharp as he could possibly be. Whether or not it wins him a banner is not guaranteed. Winning is really, really hard, but it's a real privilege to have 2 switchy All-NBA forward guard, power forward guys. So, yeah, I think the commentary around it is probably overblown, but sure. I mean, I guess maybe you wish you had 2 super duper stars instead of a superstar and a very good star. I don't know.
No, I agree with you on what you said before about how there were times in the regular season when he was better than Tatum, which is absolutely true. There were so many times when Jaylen was the one I was looking to be clutch and come up in those big moments and score or just take over the game. There were times when I trusted him more than Tatum in that situation, and that says a lot about Jaylen's ability to be a good leader for the team and be somebody that they can rely on. And he and Tatum are different too, right? Like their playing styles are different, and I'm looking at it as the type of situation where if they were going to lock down Jaylen to this type of contract, now is the time to do it, because now is the time when you're going to get him at his best ability. And I truly feel like Tatum needs Brown,
Yeah.
and vice versa. Like if this team was to let Brown walk or not sign him and extend him, and they just had Tatum and tried to find somebody else to pair with Tatum, I'd have a harder time feeling like they could win a championship that way. Like I kind of think those two have established themselves as the dynamic duo, and Tatum needs Brown to really help fuel the Celtics' success. Like I think he's so much more important to this team than people are realizing that are kind of hating on the contract and saying he wasn't worth it.
Yeah. Again, like it's fine if he's not your favorite player. It's fine that he's flawed. It just
Yeah.
if you do the math or open the trade machine, there's not much to be done about it. He's an imperfect star, but he's he is part of the Celtics fabric right now and in an important way. So I don't know. I like you can daydream about building the perfect big three in Boston. I never would have come up with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Kristaps Porzingis. But the like pragmatic side of team building is like look at the Bulls and how they're stuck with Zach LaVine. Like look at how fearfully the Knicks are treading trying to find a star. You don't just get
No.
top 10, top 15 talent. And conceivably Jaylen is top 15 talent. I mean, he made an all NBA team. And maybe there was some politicking going on there, but it's not like he was not worthy-ish, right? Like I think he earned it straight up. I know that other people disagree, but
No, I agree with you. I think with his play, he deserved it. And like
right.
we said, I do think there were times where I trusted him more than Tatum. When I was like, I feel like Jaylen is the guy,
Yeah.
certain situations.
And not for nothing. She's still young. I mean, he'll be 27, I think, in October.
Yeah.
I'm putting on my conspiracy hat. This is not reporting. There's no background to this. I don't think he cut his hand watering plants. I think something else happened. And I also think that it was more of a bother than he let on. I mean, the number of times that he came out of a game to wrap a bleeding hand. So between that situation and then last year's injured wrist, yeah, he had a lot of turnovers. Yeah, he struggled to handle the ball. He was injured in a meaningful way. And I'm not giving him a permission structure to say like, oh, I don't need to get better. I do think that those things are kind of being lost in the argument, which is he was the first or second most important contributor on teams that went to back-to-back conference finals while also dealing with these weird nagging injuries.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sometimes you do find that players aren't fully transparent about what's going on, and I think he is the type that, wants to really push through that pain and just continue to play, and in his head is probably like this is manageable, and he probably felt like it was more manageable than it actually was. And obviously, it's unfortunate because injuries are part of the game. But sometimes like they can really deter a player more than people kind of like to think that they do. And I think like that is definitely a huge factor to consider in his performance and in his play. But you keep bringing up the idea of being young, which I feel is so relevant to all of this because people, were freaking out that the Celtics haven't won a championship yet with Tatum and Brown, which first of all, you mentioned it already, winning a championship is really hard, especially in the NBA with how much you have to go through to even get to the finals and then win while you're there. But second of all, like these two still, like you said, are still so young. Like there's still time to find the combination that can help them win a championship. And I have always been a believer in the duo of Tatum and Brown. I've always said if we can find the right pieces to surround them with, then I do believe that they have the capability to win a championship. I just think it was a matter of finding the right set of players around them. And speaking of right set of players, you did mention him already in conversation. Porzingis, obviously they trade away Marcus Smart, which has been really, really tough for a lot of the fan base to swallow, I think, just because, he really was just the representation of the Boston Celtics and just, gave so much to the team, and what he did off the court too, was just really respectable. He's just a respectable human being and just really was everything that Boston entails. And so it was sad hearing that he had to go. They obviously acquired a couple first round picks in the trade that they kept pushing back. And on draft night, Brad Stevens was driving me absolutely nuts because I was like, is he going to draft at all, or what's the plan here? And then they acquire Porzingis, who has had like an interesting career. I feel like, he hasn't really been at his full potential, really, and everywhere that he's kind of been, he's underwhelmed a little bit. I think injuries obviously have played a part in that. But what are your thoughts on the Celtics moving Marcus Smart and bringing him here? Do you think that Marcus Smart being gone puts the Celtics in a worse position than they were in last year, or do you think it was a move that kind of made sense for what they're trying to do?
I actually, the three ways that you summarize this are kind of how I see it. The first is Marcus Smart was a good person. Sure, the culture of the team and the Tommy points or whatever. Like, he was just a bona fide good dude.
Yeah.
And Kristaps Porzingis has somewhere between a sketchy and a horrifying past. And I will use the word allegedly when we talk about these things, but that doesn't make it easier to stomach for certain fans. Some fans breeze past it quicker than others. But that stinks, right? To go from the highest character guy who has played for the Boston Celtics in the 21st century, maybe, to a guy with a complicated past. And again, I'm using euphemisms that feel icky. Just kind of stinks. Like, apropos the basketball, it just kind of stinks to make that pivot. I will say Marcus Smart is 29. He is always banged up. He plays a really physical brand of basketball. Brad Stevens has been really good at moving on from players quicker than I think consensus would have you believe, but then it bears out. So I could see a world where Marcus Smart is an unbelievable grit and grind mentor for the Grizzlies. I could also see a world where in 18 months, he's just physically a different player and Boston moved on quickly and prudently. Yeah, the draft thing was fun retrospectively. At the time, it was kind of annoying, but at the press conference,
I was like, is he just trolling all of us? Like, or what is he actually trying to do here? Because I'm like, geez, dude, like, just draft somebody.
What's funny is, so Mike Zarin is vice president, chief legal. He has a bunch of titles, but he's like assistant GM. And Brad gave a press conference to talk about Jordan Walsh. He talked about a few other things. And as he's getting up, and he's like, and I'll let Mike Zarin tell you what the hell just happened, as in the trading all the second round picks. And Mike Zarin is there with a big clipboard and a big smile. So I actually think Mike Zarin is the one who pulled all the strings there, and he was proud of it. Yeah, in terms of the fit, it's really interesting. What you said about the Browns, the Jays being too young. In terms of NBA history and then also psychology, human beings are not finished products in their mid-20s. Yeah. I know that, when you graduate undergrad, you think like, okay, that's it, I'm done. But realistically, the brain goes through a second puberty. And anyone who is on the other side of that, who is, 28, 29, 30 or beyond, looks back and says, wow, when I was 24, I was dumb. Not like I did dumb things. Like, I just wasn't as good at my job. I wasn't good at X, Y, and Z. And in basketball, that holds true. Unless you're, Magic Johnson or you're Shaq and you get to play alongside Kobe, high-level MVP candidates and finals MVP candidates are almost always in their late 20s or early 30s. Because you might have the physical skills, but not because you're immature or you're dumb or whatever. You just don't see the world the way that someone in their late 20s does. I mean, part of why NBA players peak is not their body. I mean, when their body gets more in shape, hopefully. But it really is a product of how the brain works. And it's not a knock on young NBA players. That's how all young 20-somethings are. If anyone has ever read the book, The Defining Decade, I wouldn't read it I would read it in your early 20s because it's kind of like eating your vegetables, but it's kind of like, congratulations, you're 22, buckle up. So I want to take that, and I'll Google this to fact check myself, but I think Porzingis is turning 28 in August. Which is right. He turns 28 August 2nd. Oh, it's your birthday coming up. So all of that is to say, did I just cut out?
No.
Okay, sorry, I just Googled something. All of that is to say, I'm going to offer the same runway to Porzingis, which is young players sometimes act immature on and off the court, sometimes make silly mistakes, whereas older players generally have a knack at tightening the screws. And Porzingis was really good at Washington, I think, because there were absolutely no stakes. I also think he's a little bit older. I think he understands the game better. I think he understands his game better. And so as much as the off the court stuff, I want to give anyone the right to say, actually, that still rings really true, even though it was a couple of years ago. The on the court product, just because it didn't work in New York and he had a bad relationship with Luka, doesn't necessarily tell me much about who he is here at 28. So it stinks because Marcus Smart was a good guy. And maybe Porzingis is a good guy. I don't know. It's a really intriguing fit. It's something few front offices either have the stones or the backing to do. I mean, it didn't smack of desperation, it smacked of being clever. And I have said to other people, if another team pulled it off, I think I would like tip my cap and just like sit back and wait and see. And so for Boston, that's kind of where I'm at. It's really bold and intriguing.
Yeah.
Who knows?
No, it's definitely interesting to me. Smart was definitely not the player I expected them to move. I did, when the off season started, like, and we saw, them lose to the Heat and all of that. I said, I think there's going to be somebody that moves, and it's going to be somebody who's really connected to Boston, like somebody who is, actively involved with the play, like a starter. But I didn't really think it would be Marcus Smart. I know they originally were trying to move Brogdon, and then that whole thing fell through. I'm actually happy they kept Brogdon. I think he's super important to the team. And it would have been tough to see him go because the bench depth would have been, a lot tougher if he did move. But this kind of tells me that they trust, that they really, really trust Derek White more so than we thought, I guess, because I like Derek White. I'm a fan of him. I think he makes things happen when he's on the court. But, I feel like obviously they still had Marcus Smart there and kind of saw him more as the number one point guard. But this to me feels like the Celtics see something in Derek White that they feel like is going to be more valuable going forward. And he's probably going to be that guy now.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he's a little bit faster and a little bit taller than Marcus. And he's impactful on defense in a different way. I mean, no one is Marcus Smart. So he doesn't read as a traditional point guard like Chris Paul or Rajon Rondo, but they don't really need that. And I don't think Brad Stevens wants that. I think he's sick of, rolling the dice on undersized point guards who need the ball. I guess it's worth, while we're thinking out loud, it seems like the narrative is now they're not going to trade Brogdon, but maybe they'll trade Brogdon later, and that will be their one more chance to make a big swing. It occurs to me that Al Horford or Derek White would be valuable on the trade market, and if Boston wanted to shuffle the deck or needed to soften the blow of, having three super highly paid guys, that could happen. But as it stands, Derek White is, he was all NBA defensive second team, I believe. He obviously played his heart out in the playoffs, and he probably would have had a bigger role if Joe Mazzulla's guard rotation was a mess. And so, look, Brad Stevens said, here's fewer guards for you to play with, and you have to play big because the third highest paid player is huge.
Yeah, no, for sure. Are you concerned at all about the defense as a whole for the team? Because they did struggle defensively overall as a unit, and losing Marcus Smart's defense. I mean, obviously that was a huge asset that he brought to this team, was his defense. Do you feel like they're going to take a step back defensively without him as an overall team?
They'll take some sort of step. I don't know. At some point last season, it came out that Joe Mazzulla was the one who actually planned Udoka's defense, that it was his vision for how the defense was meant to operate. And it just seemed like it wasn't working on an individual effort standpoint. Like the team was less cohesive. So it probably is a net negative to lose Marcus Smart, who's a player coach and a really vocal one, who could direct traffic on defense. And let's be honest, Jaylen Brown chose to double team, and should have chose to double team often and without reason. And Malcolm Brogdon isn't very good on defense. And those two things were huge vulnerabilities for the Celtics. Personnel-wise, I think Porzingis is a really fascinating defender. There are good clips of him, getting his clock cleaned by other bigs, but there are also really good clips of him defending the rim in like an extraordinary way. I mean, if Porzingis can stay home and defend the rim and Rob Williams gets to roam, Boston's defense is going to be just beastly. So at the end of the day, the NBA is a story of super duper stars that, every so often Andre Iguodala comes in and wins finals MVP, but by and large, the people who get to the finals and win the finals do so on the strength of their star play. So yeah, the defense needs to be solid and the offense needs to be somewhat balanced, but this team goes as far as Tatum and Brown go. I think they both have the physical gifts to be really good defenders. I think Tatum is increasingly a really, really good defender. And when Brown is focused, he's also a really good defender. So I think probably they'll be a top 10 defense because, they have the talent and the size and the switchability. I don't think they're going to be, the 2008 Celtics or even the 2021 Celtics.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to this past season, I think there really were a lot of growing pains that came with that season, especially with Joe Mazzulla kind of stepping into the role that he did and everything that happened with Udoka and just having to adjust to being in a head coaching role and having the team adapt to him being a head coach. And obviously when he goes up against coaches like Spoelstra, who obviously is so experienced and is just such a great coach and really had that Heat team prepared for every step of the playoffs. When you go against a coach like that and you're a first year head coach, it is tough to really, match the coaching that comes with that. But I think it's good for him now that he's been in that situation of being in the playoffs with this team and the players are more adapted to him and his coaching style when he's at the helm. And they also have made some moves this offseason to really surround him with good talent on his coaching staff. So I actually think that's going to help make more of a difference than people realize because there was a lot of pressure on him to make these decisions, especially in the postseason. And there were questionable decisions that he was making in terms of, his rotations and his timeout management and little things like that I think we're going to see a lot of improvement in this upcoming season. And the fact that they're surrounding him with coaches who are experienced and talented and very knowledgeable that can kind of be there in support of him, I think is also going to make a huge difference in the Celtics' success in this upcoming season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we'll see with Mazzulla. I believe in him. But that's a belief. There's just not that much of a track record there.
Yeah. It's just such a small sample size still.
Yeah, and I think really good coaches can take underwhelming rosters and help elevate them. But when your roster is designed to be a contender, I guess I don't know how far I think coaching goes one way or the other. This is reductive and I'm repeating myself, but I guess it really depends on if Tatum is the guy. If Tatum is up there with generational greats, it doesn't matter who's coaching him. He'll figure it out. And soon enough, the team will, follow his lead. If he is a very, very, very good player, but not generationally good, that doesn't mean Boston can't win a title, but maybe the coaching becomes more important. So it won't be an easy task. Joe Mazzulla is a brilliant weirdo, so I think he's up for it. I'm sure he's excited by a new chessboard to play with. And the geography of how the Celtics play on offense is going to be fascinating, but we'll see. I don't think there was any world where they fired Mazzulla. I think unless Jaylen Brown said, I am not extending unless you make a coaching change, it was never going to happen. So, and to that end, I suspect his job is safe for at least another season. There's nothing good that comes from more turbulence. It's the same thought experiment with moving on from Jaylen Brown. It's like, okay, so then who comes the coach? People will say Sam Cassell, but he's never been a head coach, so we don't know either. So it's an interesting challenge for Mazzulla. He's 35 now. So he also, I mean, he just became eligible to become president. Like, he's not someone who has a ton of experience. He's also figuring it out. But I think that's where the Brown extension really lies. Is Brown will start his extension next season. Tatum could extend next summer, but it might be the summer after that, depending on how he reads the salary cap tea leaves. The Celtics are set up to have two really, really, really good players throughout the 2020s. Other teams have to, navigate their books and stuff in a changing CBA landscape. Boston now has stability where there was once more than a few unanswered questions,
Oh yeah, for sure. Now it's like we know like these are the two guys they want to build around, and they're committed to trying to build a championship caliber team with these two at the heart of that. Are you concerned at all about this limiting their ability to sign other high caliber players around them? Even just in terms of other bench like role players or just other players in general that you could use in the supporting cast that might cost more because of this Jaylen Brown contract now, and assuming they're going to offer a similar caliber contract to Tatum when it's his turn for that. Are you concerned about the limited ability for them to make other moves that can really make them a good all-around team because they're putting so much money into those two players? And now with Porzingis obviously on the books too.
Right. So it'll present challenges, but not challenges that are that unique to the Celtics. Insofar as if you want to have two stars in the league, unless they are young or you get lucky, like the Steph Curry, Kevin Durant stuff only worked because Steph was injured. So he signed a below market contract, and then the cap spiked and they could sign Durant. Most of the time you can't afford, 5 all-star players unless even with the Warriors and the Suns, their owners are going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in luxury taxes. The new CBA, I don't have a great handle on, but if Boston, as projected, becomes a second apron team, not this coming season, but the following season, they will incur financial penalties. They'll also incur team building penalties. And if they are a repeat second apron team, those penalties get stricter. So there's a world where 3 seasons from now, whatever Boston's roster is at or around training camp is the roster, because they won't have access to certain types of MLEs. They won't be able to trade player salaries unless they're like a super even match, and on and on and on. So they will eventually hit a threshold where keeping Brown and Tatum both at 35% of the cap, plus Porzingis, who is, I don't know what the math is offhand, but a big chunk of the cap, will mean that they're going to have to fill out the rest of the roster with young guys, old guys, or unproven guys. But that's kind of the nature of the beast with teams that contend, is their windows are not decades unless there's this crazy outlier like the Warriors, or you have also like the Warriors, an owner that's going to spend $1 gajillion. So who knows, maybe Wick will even richer, and he actually will, he'll be the new Steve Ballmer, and he'll just pay and pay and pay. It doesn't change what the CBA does, but guess what? Every team has to deal with that. So as much as Boston is going to get, I guess what I think is really the CBA is bad, because middle-class NBA players are going to, can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
Middle-class NBA players are going to get fucked. The richest contracts are still going to go through. Guys are still going to get their maxes and their super maxes. The floor got lifted, and newer, younger, unproven guys are going to have more money in their pocket. But in 2026, when Boston has $8 million to sign 5 guys, the average or slightly below average NBA player is going to have a tough time finding teams with salary to sign them. So I really don't know much about this, the origin of the CBA, but I suspect it's going to screw a ton of NBA players. That, to your question, will make it hard for Boston, but it will be hard for any team that is, unless they are ascendant. If they have been contending or they are contending with super duper stars, they're also going to feel that squeeze.
Yeah, and it's just, I feel like the Celtics are in a good spot because of the timing of when they lock down Jaylen, because I feel like other teams and fan bases of other teams are going to see like how this is all going to affect players moving forward. And then people are going to look back at this deal that the Celtics made with Jaylen, and it's going to look really, really nice, because that now the expectation now, and just these NBA contracts in general, that's just how it is. And now it's like,
Right.
other players are going to look at this Jaylen Brown contract and want the same kind of money. So now it's like already that bar has been lifted even higher. So now it's like players of Jaylen Brown's caliber are going to be demanding that type of money. And if you're maybe like a little lower tier than Jaylen, like you're going to be asking for more than you might normally, because this is really, really going to, have other players look at it and be like, I want that kind of money too. Like if the Celtics can sign Jaylen Brown to that type of money, like why shouldn't I ask for something similar? So those effects longer term, people are going to see that, and it's going to be more expensive. And then people are going to be like, wow, like the Celtics had really good timing when it came to the whole Jaylen Brown situation. And like right now, it might look to people like it's too much money or whatever it is they're saying. But down the road, it's going to look like a nice deal when other players are starting to ask for a ton of money, down the road.
Yeah, I mean, so Jaylen earned the possibility of making supermax money because you made an All NBA team. Yep. Otherwise, you have to have 10 years of service. So, for example, when this contract ends in Boston or otherwise, he'll be 31. He's going to turn around and want a max contract. Yeah. And so there are going to be teams in the next few years, as the salary cap keeps going up, who are going to sign guys in their 30s because they don't have, like Paul George's next contract. Paul George is a good player, but he's going to want 5 years and $70 million a year when that's the parlance. And so Boston is in this situation where the numbers are gobsmacking because they're new, but they're going to have two guys in their 20s at a cost-controlled contract. They're not going to have to turn around and sign dudes who are, on their way out to these big contracts. So, like I said, it creates challenges for Boston, but every team in the NBA is going to deal with these weird new CBA constraints.
Yeah, people love to have those narratives of like whatever fits their narrative and like favors what they're talking about. So people like to act like this is a Celtics only problem. But at the end of the day, it's just really not, because I saw some people on Twitter that were like, this is so bad for the Celtics because now like they're never going to be able to surround him with any other talent. And so like it's going to be really hard for them to win a championship because they're putting too much money into like two players. But it's like, so other teams don't do that. Other teams don't offer like big contracts to like their superstar caliber players. Like Jaylen Brown is so important to the Celtics team,
Yeah. Boston's been playing with house money since the late 2020 or the 20 teens. Like that Tatum and Brown were impactful players at such a young age is great. Because that's the sweet spot. But yeah, when players mature, they should and they want to be paid. And that's the whole point of team building, is to get to a point where you have star players to pay. So everything's going according to plan. Like, this is a thing to celebrate.
Yeah, like people would be like, imagine the reaction if like they let Jaylen walk or whatever, and then he just like they didn't extend him and he went elsewhere. Like imagine the criticism at that point. People would be like, well, the Celtics are so stupid. Like, why would they not keep Jaylen Brown? So it's like you can't really win anyway. But Brad Stevens hasn't given me a reason to not trust him. So I trust those, front office types of decisions that he's making. And Jaylen, you need to keep somebody like that on the team right now when it feels like they're currently in that championship window. You want to keep the people who are at the heart of that championship window that are likely going to be the players that lead your team to that success. And Jaylen, to me, is, it's him and Tatum like this, and then everybody else, you need to get them the right pieces around them to get there. But I don't think that, I think this team would have a lot harder of a time if they didn't keep Jaylen Brown right now, because I think it's he makes a huge impact here, and I think Tatum really needs him here too.
Sure.
Do you think that their offseason now is done, or do you think that Brad Stevens is going to make more moves? Because I know there are people out there hoping that he makes more moves before the season starts, because they feel like the team is now in a worse position than they were last year due to the absence of Smart.
I don't I don't know that Brad Stevens is not someone who cares what our opinions are.
Yeah, literally, he doesn't at all. I don't know if people think that he does. But.
Yeah, so I don't think he cares what would be, the agreeable thing or the like thing. It makes sense for Boston to flirt with an all-in move. In the Globe, I guess the source told the Globe that they're poised to make a seismic move, which is kind of fun to frame it as such.
Yeah.
They can. Look, they can with Horford and it would hurt, but with Horford and Brogdon, they have real money to move around. Derek White too, if you really want to go for it. They have all of these future picks. At any given point, they could be players to go get another star caliber fringe all-star or something like that. That said, the realistic answer is probably they sign a veteran guy on a vet minimum, or knowing Brad Stevens, it'll be a guy we've never thought about or heard of to round out the roster. I think they only have 11 guaranteed spots right now, so there's more to come, but I don't think I wouldn't describe what's to come as seismic. Certainly not before the season begins. The trade deadline could be really interesting. There's value in spending big this season because the CBA is kind of smoothed, so the penalties this coming season aren't as stark as the following season, and then Brown's extension kicks in. So there's good reason to maybe swing for the fences this coming season. But again, just saying, we'll trade Brogdon on a first-round pick. Okay, then for whom? Doesn't necessarily. He's the reigning sixth man of the year. Like, there's no value there. So whatever happens with Lillard and Harden could shake things up. Whatever, if Toronto decides to make a move, could shake things up. And there are teams like the Thunder or even the Jazz who there are a few young guys that they're going to have to probably say goodbye to sooner rather than later. I wouldn't be surprised if Boston is doing its due diligence, that we'll hear stories that, they've made a call to such and such a team. I don't think that they're going to trade Brogdon before February anyways, but Brad Stevens has done a lot of surprising things, so I'm not going to guarantee that.
Yeah, he's so hard to predict. Like, it's kind of impossible to say, I think Brad Stevens is going to do this. And I think he, in his mind, sees a vision for this team. And I've learned to kind of just trust the process and trust what he's doing because, again, he hasn't really given me a reason not to. I feel like, looking at the Celtics roster right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they make another move. But like you said, I don't think it's like a huge splash. Like, I think the huge splash they were going to make is what they already did. So I think it might just be like, a piece or two to kind of help round out the roster, but nobody who's like a huge name or anything like that, that's going to help, like change fans' perspectives on how they're feeling now. And like, I get the emotional aspect of it. Like, people are sad that Marcus Smart is gone. And like, I get it. Like, it's sad. But at the end of the day too, like, I feel like he's kind of past the best part of his career. And I think the Celtics already had him at his best part of his career. And obviously his defense is still really good, but it did digress a little bit in this past season from the prior season before that. And, obviously from an offensive standpoint, he is not the best offensive point guard either. So I do understand kind of the cons to his game that I looked at and said, yeah, like we don't necessarily need him anymore to win a championship, because at the end of the day, it is a business and the front office doesn't care about the emotional aspect of like how we as fans are going to feel if somebody's gone. They care about winning and who do you bring in that's going to help put you in the best position to win. And, I hope he is successful. I obviously, like, I'll always be a fan of Marcus Smart. Like, he did so much for Boston, but I do understand maybe some of the reasons why they felt like he wasn't going to be valuable to a championship Celtics team at this point.
Yeah, I think the party line is they wanted Porzingis so bad that when the Brogdon thing fell apart, they went ahead and did the Smart deal. But they had conversations with Memphis about Smart prior to that. So I think you're exactly right that their read on what happens next for Marcus Smart as a basketball player, maybe it's not in the next season or two, but somewhere down the line, he was going to become a different player in by some accounts. And so they sold high on it. I mean, bringing back a former All-Star and 2 first-round picks, even if they split those picks, is unbelievable value for, I don't know, your 4th or 5th best player.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, if another team pulled this, you'd be like, wow, that's a lot of moxie there, but I see the vision. And clearly Brad Stevens saw the vision if he went from trading Brogdon to trading Smart.
Yeah. No, honestly. And I like Brogdon. I think he obviously provided a lot of value for this team this past season. And he really was great off the bench and really helped me feel like the Celtics bench was in good shape. So it'll be interesting to see if they still decide to move him or not. But I just hope people can stay healthy. I mean, Porzingis, can he please have a healthy season? I mean, Rob Williams, can he please have a healthy season? That's the other thing too that I like about the Porzingis deal is, obviously Rob Williams himself has an injury history too. And so being able to bring somebody else in who can kind of share the workload with him, because who knows what Al Horford's situation is going to be too.
Right.
Like bring another body in there who has had experience and, defensively can be pretty good, makes me feel a little bit better about the situation because it's hard to rely fully on Rob Williams to be in that role, which the Celtics are 100% a better team when he's in the game, and we've seen it. But since he has that injury history, you do really need somebody else who can come in and kind of share that workload. So I just hope that somebody can be healthy and, because like it's always so tough seeing Rob Williams go down every year.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a long season because as much as we'll try to learn about this new look Celtics, like all that matters is what happens in the second round and beyond of the playoffs. And that's the same with injury history. Like it would be great for guys to stay healthy in the regular season, but like, frankly, I don't care. I'd rather them be healthy in April and go from there. So
yeah,
we'll see. It'll be an interesting balance of load management and minutes and stuff for the front court because all those guys will. I assume Horford won't play back-to-backs, and then Porzingis and Rob will need to be monitored as well.
Yeah. No, it should be an interesting situation, but I'm definitely intrigued to see how Porzingis fits in with all of this and if it ends up, paying dividends for the Celtics or not. But I definitely appreciate you hopping on here with me, giving your insight. I always love, chatting with other people who are passionate about the team and kind of hearing what their thoughts are on different things. So before I let you go, just let people know like how they can kind of follow you on social media and find your content.
Sure. Like and subscribe to the Celtics Lab podcast. Bookmark Celtics Wire. I don't think there's utility in plugging my Twitter because that website sucks. So I still use it, but if you could spell my name, you can find me. But yeah,
Elon Musk is just he's a tough one.
I'm biting my tongue to the point of it might start bleeding. No, this was so fun. I'm going to Brad Stevens' press conference in a few hours, so this helped me kind of organize my thinking. So this was also valuable to me. But I had a blast, and maybe we'll do it again during the regular season.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely have you back on during the season. But I, again, thank you very much for hopping on. Appreciate everybody tuning into the show as always. I'm so happy for Jaylen Brown. I'm excited to, have him for the next few years. And let's hope we can get Banner 18 in that time as well. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in as always. And hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone.